Good afternoon. This is Jason Dean at YouTube. If you get a chance and you like any of this strange material that I show, please like and subscribe to my YouTube page. I've been cranking out the videos lately. It's been a lot of fun. Like I've said before, my schedule's a little bit easier now, so I can do the videos really anytime. I've been typically doing them in the morning or afternoon, so it's been a lot of fun. I used to do them on weekends, and usually I would do them. A lot of the times I used to do them on Saturdays, and then I usually do them like at night during the week. But it's just a little bit easier, and I feel a little bit more refreshed. I have a little bit more energy if I do these videos on the earlier side. And plus, I've been going and getting, you know, all kinds of movies lately at Bull Moose, and it's been great. And so I've been really diving deep, and so I've been, with my schedule being a lot easier, and also with me just buying a lot more movies, I've been wanting to crank them out left and right. So it's been super fun, and it's been a blast. And I appreciate everybody checking out the videos and keeping this strange hobby that I do alive, and also putting it in a place where it can kind of keep growing. So I'm kind of always trying to think of new ideas and new things that I want to improve on because I realize, especially now with this whole YouTube channel thing, it's an entirely new um, format. So I'm learning as I go. So the more I do it, the better I figure I'll get at it and develop a little bit more of a skill set. One of the things I'm trying to focus more on in the future is around doing like interview segments. So I'm going to be doing a couple of shows coming up with my friend Emmett Layler, who I play music with, and he's a great friend, and he's also really, really a deep lover of films. So we're going to be doing a show where we're going to center the whole show on everything that's related to Stephen King. Being that we're Mainers, we live here in Maine. He lives in Camden, I live in Northport, and plus Stephen King has really he's one of the you know probably the biggest the most well known uh, person in the horror field as far as being a writer in his films, and he's so prolific, and he also yeah, the other thing that's been so wild and crazy is since the whole like streaming thing has really exploded, he seems to be even more prolific as far as well, he's always been prolific as far as books go, but I think he has like close to 70 books published. But with the uh, explosion of all the streaming platforms now and services, there's been all kinds of adaptations to a lot of his stories, more now than ever. So it's pretty unbelievable. And when we were talking about this idea for doing a show, Emmett and I was, wanted to obviously. I'm not as well read as he is in the world of Stephen King. Um, I do like him, and definitely there's certain stories of his that I've always loved, but he's a kind of a specialist when it comes to that. I'm a little bit more familiar with more of his films. But when we were talking about how we wanted to kind of, do the show and what we wanted to try to be focused on, usually I try to keep the shows pretty loose. I try to, you know, go in with an obvious set of ideas about a particular thing we want to focus on. In the past, like we did shows, I've done a couple of shows with a few other guests. Lydia Manson, for instance, who is an actress, and she's an actress in a lot of like low budget indie horror films. So the whole focus of the show was basically centered on her perspective of being an actress in a lot of these low budget films. We talked about a lot of other things, but it was mostly focused on that. And then my really great friend Sean Russell was on the show, and we did an interview, and that was super fun. That and he has a real extensive background as far as like doing soundtracks and scoring documentaries and independent films. So we tried to focus it a little bit more on that kind of thing as a starting point, and then we went off into lots of other So territory. So like with the show that we're going to be doing, uh, that Emmett and I are going to be doing, we were talking about ideas, and I know we always he always brings up Stephen King, and we watch lots of movies together. So we decided the show is going to be centered on his work, and it's it's incredibly huge and vast, um and but when I was thinking of ideas around certain movies I wanted to maybe talk about around his career, I realized how many films there were, and I was just like, wow, I kind of forgot how many films there were, and that are still coming out. A lot of great classics, like Salem's Lot is one of my all-time favorites. So that's going to be a good show. So we'll talk about that as the focus point around Stephen King, and then we'll mix it up and go into other territory. And the other show that I'm really excited is I'm going to be having one of the actresses that was involved with um, the Friday the 13th franchise. She was in um, Friday the 13th Part 6, I believe, A New Blood. So that's going to be really exciting. So because about a few weeks ago I finished up doing a whole series on Film Fanatic where I covered all of the movies that are tied to that universe. So that's going to be really cool. I'm really excited about that, and that's going to be coming up probably in a few weeks. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, as far as like the quantum thing, news or things around the quantum front, right now I'm just taking. We're taking a. We had two gigs that we just did like the weekend before last, and those were those were both a blast, and we did them both in one day, and they were one was not planned. It was like literally we were asked the day of, and I thought it wasn't going to happen. I didn't really know the details, but then we ended up doing it, and it was ended up being a super great time. And we tried to play more of a dance kind of a set, and it went felt like it went really well. It was super fun, and but I had been working on this brand new tune the last few weeks, so I decided, why not just give it a whirl and test it out, and so we debuted a new quantum tune, and I that's really fresh. Like I just finished it, so and that was fun to like actually see what it would be like to play out, and that's been really great. One of the things I've always thought about too, I feel really positive, and I feel like I'm really glad. I remember quite a few years ago. It was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. I had a musician friend of mine who uh, is a really great bass player. I used to play in a band with him, Spike Hassan. I used to play in a couple of different bands with him, and he's an amazing musician. And we played in a couple of jazz groups together for a few years that was a lot of fun and a real big challenge. And I definitely missed that part of of that time. But and we also played every week together at the Fog open mic when that was going on. So we used to do that. We were part of the Monday night band, so we used to get to play together all the time and be the backup band for various people that wanted bands or not, whatnot. And I remember he said to me, he's like, he was aware of the Quantum Project, and he's like, that's a really, I remember he turned to me and said, like, I feel like for you, it's like to a degree, like a dream realized. And and I was like, you know what? That's a really cool thing to say, and I don't know, it was kind of touching, and I never really had anybody say that to me, and I also never really thought about it to a degree in that kind of context of it being this like fully realized thing. And it was a few years ago, and it's always been a thing for me to I'd always had a dream to kind of start my own project where it's basically just me and maybe one or two other people, but something that we could maybe build and make into an actual group or project that could have like some kind of longevity, and that was centered on, all original material. And it was interesting because when he said that, things like kind of crystallized for me in a lot of ways where I was like, that's really great. And that really is for me, in a nutshell, what the band Quantum represents to me. It's really a culmination of just who I am. It's a funny thing. Like, on one hand, I take everything really, really seriously with that group and what I do, and then on the other hand, I look at it as just like really this incredibly strange, weird, silly thing that I do, and I don't take it seriously. So it's always like in the middle. And on one surface, on one hand, the music is very, very personal, but at the same time, I try not to take everything that seriously. And when we perform or people like the music, on one hand, it could be, you know, maybe something that resonates with people where they have a good time, or they think it's something kind of unusual or just different to see, and they like that it is. They might not be necessarily even into the music per se, but they like that it's just a little bit different. And that's something you would typically see. And so, and on one hand, like, the music can be, deeply personal, which it is for me. Like, if somebody was to, split my head open and be like, "Oh, what are your thoughts? What's your how do you operate?" And I always feel like quantum is the best way to describe it. Like, to me, that's my how I function. Is That's a representation of everything that I am. So it's very, very personal, but it's always that balance. So, in the future, after this summer, which I feel like this summer has been just fantastic. We had a lot of shows, and it really helped. We put out a new album this year, and bands always have good shows and bad shows, but I feel like the good ones that we did play were just pretty fantastic, and I feel really, um, like a deep sense of humility around it, and I also feel really like it's a precious thing for me to be able to do this project, and to do it in a way, to do it in an environment that might not normally be accepting or open to uh, things that are kind of fringe, and I somehow have made it into a real thing that actually can work, and can actually be something, and something that's present. And also with being in a situation where the music that we do and the environment isn't really, say, per se, isn't really set up for electronic music. There aren't multiple venues. There aren't any venues really that do that sort of thing around here. There's lots of lots of bars and rock clubs and things of that nature that you can go and see music. But probably the closest thing is maybe Portland, Maine. But that's more even centered, I think, to like more of the DJ kind of thing. And so what we're doing is electronic stuff. So we've always had obstacles. We've always had all kinds of roadblocks. And it's always because we don't have that access. We don't have a, like, a regular, we're not in a community or a town or a city that has those options. So it's always made me think of, like, how to, or it's forced me to really think outside of the box. Like, how can we make this weird thing kind of work? And some people, you have the parts of the audience or parts of the public that, on one hand, really, really like it and seem to really dig it, and then other people have this thing where they don't really accept electronic music per se as real music because it's digital. And then you have this other perception of people where they don't know what the hell to make of it, because some of our stuff is on the fringe side, and it's got an experimental kind of edge to it, and psychedelic kind of thing. And so it can be come across as something that's really too weird or strange for some folks. And we always like have those three things as being like, I don't know, key point reactions that we get from people. But there's been enough positive um, of a reaction that we can keep this thing going and making it happen. It's like if you lived in a city, like say, like a major city. One city I've heard is like really really great for electronic music is like Houston, Texas, and then there's another city I heard of like where, there's areas in New York and Montreal, Canada, and there's Boulder, Colorado. Colorado is supposed to be a pretty happening place. There's all so like typically in cities there's obviously along with like rock clubs or whatnot. There are clubs that kind of cater towards electronic music, and but we live in an area where that's not really a thing. So it's always been a challenge. But I don't know. I kind of feel like at the end of the day, it's actually in some ways better, even though that part of it can be incredibly hard and incredibly challenging. I feel like when you actually make some inroads in that kind of environment, it seems like it actually has some substance to it, and it actually resonates with you and maybe some people. So it's been a really cool experience. I remember having that experience with a band I used to be in, Full Contact Kitty, and it was during the MySpace days, and there were no venues in our area that had these had weird arty rock bands play and noisy and kind of experimental you know uh, bands. Like that wasn't a thing. So we were kind of forced to like kind of create a space and try to really think outside of the box of trying to make something work, because we weren't, that band wasn't a band that could like learn to say a bunch of covers, learn some Bob Dylan songs or learn some Pink Floyd songs um, or whatnot, and be able to like get gigs right away. We were doing something completely outside of that. And we were doing all original material. So it was like, how do you make that work with all of these roadblocks and a lot of adversity? And it was really, really hard, really, really tough. But when we when we kind of found our way and found this thing of how we were able to make it work, we were really perseverance, and we had a lot of focus on it. And then but we were also always trying to think outside of the box because we had to. But when we kind of made things happen, regardless of the situation, that's when I realized like, oh, you can actually make these things work, even though you have all of these roadblocks. And I kind of feel like looking back on a lot of those things, I kind of feel like I'm grateful for those things in a lot of ways. I'm glad it was um, a challenge, because I think it makes you not get comfortable where you are, but it makes you think outside of the box, and you have to be creative in a lot of ways, and creative in a lot of levels, on a lot of levels of how you're gonna do this, And so I feel like, I don't know, at the end of the day, it gives you a little bit more of a focus. And so all those things that I learned back when I was in that band at that time with Full Contact Kitty, I obviously carried all of those little things that I gained over the years. I used those for our band, because it was the same literally the same exact scenario, in a lot of ways. Um, and so I feel grateful for that and being able to make it work. And I also feel like I rather have had it. I rather have been under those circumstances, as hard as it can be, and as much of a challenge. But I feel like it's probably better at the end of the day for that. It's an interesting thing. One of the one of I remember one quote from that's always stuck with me ever since and it was during that time. I remember it was during the time of the band Full Contact Kitty. And again, this is all related to films, but really great, famous playwright and also film director David Mamet, who was he wrote all kinds of stage plays in New York, I believe, and also you know was got into becoming a film director. Really, really amazing person and super talented. But he was talking a lot about. There was an interview I saw with him quite a few years ago, and basically the person who was doing the interview was asking David Mamet about like what does he feel like success is, and success is that's a really can mean a lot of things. Like I think it can it can depending on the situation, it can be really different for everyone. But he was this guy who was interviewing David Mamet. He was basically asking him like, so how what kind of advice would you give to filmmakers and people who want to eventually write their own material and have people perform it and like cultivate an audience and make this into reality. And the guy was also talking about the person who was doing the interview was also talking about like the whole idea of uh, you know we're typically if you're going to like music school or like a theater school, um, something in the arts, typically the mindset is that after you get done with your studies, you need to move to a place of where all of those things are happening. Meaning like, if you're a dancer or a filmmaker or a musician, to make it big or to be successful, you need to like move to Los Angeles, California, or you need to move to New Orleans, or you need to move to New York City, or move to Austin, Texas. And because that's where all of the energy is, that's where all the venues are, that's where all the musicians are, that's where all the arts, that's where the art is like so. It's such a concentrated mecca for that. And so he was saying, this guy in the interview was saying, well, is that still like a thing that a person should do, and and feel like they need to move to a place that automatically has all of those things, although there's the competitive element is brutal or can be in a lot of ways. Um, and David Mamet was saying he kind of got away from that notion of thinking that you needed to do that, like that you needed to um, you get a degree or you get this knowledge and you acquire a skill set. He decided he got away from that idea of like, well, you have to go to New York to be able to make it big or be successful, or like what success is, or whatnot. His whole thing was wherever that person is or they feel just comfortable, they could create that reality. They don't necessarily have to be in New York to be able to be successful. They can, through a lot of focus and energy, you can just kind of create that reality of wherever you are and have your work become a thing and bring it into fruition and make it a reality. And I always thought that was super interesting. And I remember reading or seeing an interview with him when he talked about that, where he said the artists or the people who are wanting to put this thing together, they can, if they're determined to do it, they have enough focus and they stay positive, they can just wherever they are, they can just make it happen. It's not necessarily a thing that you need to move to a place where automatically there are those opportunities. But that being said, those areas and those cities are amazing, and those are definitely options because you do learn an incredible amount. I've spent a lot of time playing in New York City with lots of different bands and musicians, and and it's an amazing place. The competitive nature of it is can be really overwhelming, but it gives you a great sense of humility. And at the end of the day, those places are still meccas. Where there is a heavy volume and it's really concentrated for the arts, so that is still is an option. But I thought what David Mamet's take on it was very interesting, and where he using this like creative focus wherever you are, you can, through to a degree, creative visualization, you can just kind of make those things happen. And that always stuck with me. And it was during the time when I had Full Contact Kitty, and that kind of, I don't know, that outlook or that philosophy around it has always stuck with me, and I use that, all the time. So anyway, so this brings me to this unbelievable, amazing movie that I just bought, Demons. I just bought this a couple weeks ago, less than that. And this movie was directed by Lamberto Bava. Lamberto Bava is a pretty famous Italian director. Um, he he made a whole slew of movies in Italy, um, and he also collaborated a lot with Dario Argento. So this movie is pretty fantastic. I hadn't seen this movie in so many years. Um, he also worked on Cannibal Holocaust, which was, it might be Lamberto Bava's most popular movie. He was involved with an Inferno, Tenebrae, Demons, uh, Bay of Blood, Demons 2, Rabid Dogs, Kill Baby Kill. He made all these just incredible exploitation movies. The classic, all these great classic, particularly Cannibal Holocaust, which is regarded as like one of the most popular kind of horror exploitation movies. This movie, Demons, came out in 1986, and it's basically the general story is a group of people who are trapped in a West Berlin movie theater infested with ravenous demons who proceed to kill and possess the people one by one, and thus multiplying their numbers. And I got this Blu-ray, and I definitely saw this as a kid, but it was like literally watching it for the first time. Unfortunately, there's no special features on here, which I thought there was, but so that was disappointing. But the artwork is just amazing, and the Blu-ray version of this is just like, it's breathtaking. It's such an incredibly gorgeous film, and it's incredibly gory. It's so unbelievable. Um, and the whole premise, like I said, is basically these people are given invitations to go to see this horror movie, and the theater itself is basically a demon onto itself, and these people they become possessed, and they start turning into these demons, and it's very similar to like a zombie apocalypse kind of thing, only that there are zombies, and the brutal violence in this movie is just so unbelievably satisfying, and it's super funny, it's super campy, amazing soundtrack too. It's got music from Motley Crue and Billy Idol, and just a phenomenal movie. But the transfer of this film on for this classic is just phenomenal. And Dario Argento produced this, which was really cool. And this is like, yeah, this is definitely such a classic, and definitely one of the best and one of the greatest, you know, Italian exploitation movies ever. 1985, just amazing. I highly recommend seeing this film, and if you're a Blu-ray collector, definitely get this on Blu-ray because it's a gorgeous, gorgeous movie. So this is Jason Dean. So thanks again for checking out the video, and we will see you next time. Peace.